Battlefield is back. It's a phrase that's been overused with Battlefield 6, but having played the full release extensively, I'm pleased to say it actually is. However, I just can't shrug the feeling I was expecting a little bit more at launch, and that fans will be too. Everything had been coming together nicely for Battlefield 6 ahead of its release. The open beta went down well, the taste of the single player campaign looked promising, and Portal promised more options than ever. It's no secret Electronic Arts, or EA, has poured pretty much everything it's got into getting Battlefield back to the glory days of Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Following Battlefield 2042, which was a bit of a flop when it launched in 2021, the pressure has been on EA. Some online even called Battlefield 6 the last chance saloon for the series. And for the most part, EA has absolutely nailed it. I'm a big fan of Battlefield 6, but in its state at launch, I was expecting a little bit more. A review code was provided by the publisher and I played Battlefield 6 on a base PS5. Starting with the campaign, the year is 2027 and NATO is in disarray as a private military corporation known as Pax Armata has risen to take advantage of the chaos. You play it as members of the elite Marine Raiders unit Dagger 1-3 as they go on a series of missions to fight against Pax Armata's grab for power. The characters you play as each have different classes across Assault, Engineer, Support and Recon, so you get to try out loads of different approaches. Assault is frontline, Engineers take out vehicles and repair equipment, Support are medics, and Recon scouts and snipes. There are 9 missions in total that take you across the globe, including Gibraltar, Egypt, Tajikistan and the US. It took me around 6 hours to complete the campaign while spending a little bit of time looking for collectible dog tags. And it's solid. The missions themselves are fun and the story itself is decent enough, but the standouts are the personal moments where you feel like a soldier in a war you have no say in. This isn't about being a hero, but rather being a part of a squad, a pawn on the battlefield where soldiers on the same side don't even always agree with each other about what's going on. Those moments come across really well, and at times you even question yourself about what you have to do and why you're doing it. It's very clever in that way. But the overarching story isn't quite as compelling. I get the campaign in a Battlefield title isn't necessarily the main attraction, and it needs to be fairly short and concise to keep players interested through its duration, but it feels as though some elements are just underdeveloped, such as the villain and even one of the soldiers that comes on board with your squad further into the game, and the twist towards the end is a little bit predictable. Having said that, the ending itself is fantastic and really makes you think and reflect about the perceptions you have playing up until that moment. The missions are great and varied, and it's engaging pretty much throughout. You'll be beach landing on the shores of Gibraltar in a tank, fighting through New York City townhouses using thermal scopes on your gun, and infiltrating huge bases. The missions are very Battlefield, brilliantly over the top in some cases, huge scales of destruction you get to play through or make yourself, and being given the license to approach some objectives however you want to. I mentioned in our campaign preview I was wary if we'd already been given a look at the very best missions Battlefield 6's campaign had to offer, and aside from the final mission, that was what I felt after the credits rolled. In terms of visuals and performance, the game looks brilliant when running as it should. The landscapes are stunning, and on the whole, the level of detail is pretty strong. However, there was quite a lot of jank I experienced in the campaign. Jank's basically a term for bugs and glitches. There were too many instances that took me out of the immersion. You can run through other characters and even stand in them to some degree to see strange outlines, their eyeballs and teeth. You can shoot through them to take out enemies too. There was one section early on where my comrade said the coast was clear, only for him and an enemy soldier to be awkwardly standing off before I took the enemy down, and we proceeded as planned. Some character animations when performing key actions in the story are a little off too. It just isn't quite as polished as I would expect. I did turn off motion blur, but some of these animations did still stand out. In larger landscapes, there is the occasional pop in and out that's noticeable too. It's these little things that just kept me thinking, that's strange, and it wasn't just the odd moment here or there. In pretty well every mission, there was something that took me out of that immersion. Speaking of performance, one of the first things I always do is play around with the visual settings, and there are 2 main presets, which are balanced and performance. I'm someone that usually likes to play in performance mode for the highest FPS or frames per second, so I switched to this, but the moment I did, playing on a base PS5, there was really bad tearing and stuttering in this mode, to the point where I couldn't really focus on what was actually going on. It was quite simply unplayable for me. That's because balance mode already targets 60 FPS, whereas performance mode targets 120 FPS. I play on a 60Hz TV, and this is a refresh rate the majority of console players will play on. I'm surprised I was able to access performance mode at all on this platform, despite my TV not being compatible. But when I switched back to balance, it was completely fine after that and looked great. I stayed with balance throughout the rest of the review and did not encounter any issues on that front. Let's be honest, most people played Battlefield for its multiplayer, and sticking with performance to start off, my experience on the whole in this mode was much stronger. I didn't notice anywhere near as much jank. The only thing that springs to mind is occasionally my soldier would be flung 50 metres or so high after simply being shot, but that was more amusing than anything else, and I'm sure even more so for the player that got me. Battlefield 6 looks stunning in multiplayer, and aside from that one example in terms of performance, it was pretty flawless. On large maps with a lot going on, I was incredibly impressed at how it barely missed a beat at all. It's clear this has been the focus and has been nailed in that respect. The destruction is brilliant. It does take some getting used to in terms of what can and can't be destroyed, but when you figure it out on each map, it's a joy to see it happen, and it's thrilling when it opens up so many different avenues to attack or defend. It really helps keep maps feeling fresher for longer, as it opens up so many more possibilities. Of course, some structures need to be kept, or else every map could end up looking the same and being levelled. Destruction has always been a huge focus of the Battlefield series, and I feel as though it's been done really well here. There are playlists with open and closed classes, meaning players can play with the specific builds for each class, or enjoy playlists that allow them to have free reign. I played a mix of both and enjoyed switching between the two. Closed classes present much more of a challenge, whereas open classes really allowed me to build characters exactly how I wanted to play. Conquest and Breakthrough are the two modes Battlefield is renowned for, and with my favourite class being Recon, these are easily my two favourites. In Conquest, two big teams compete to control objectives and eliminate opposing forces, and in Breakthrough, two teams go head to head where attackers advance sector by sector to claim new territory while defenders stop them. There's also Escalation, which is another large scale mode where you have to hold and remove more objectives than the enemy to conquer an area, with the first team to take 3 territories claiming victory. These modes for me are as good as they ever have been in the series, and that's because of how strong some of the maps are. Quickly on that, the maps on the whole are great and each one offers something a bit different. With my favourite class being Recon, for me the highlights are the expanses of Liberation Peak, New Sobek City and Siege of Cairo with their possibilities for longer range attacks. One map that kept having me tearing my hair out though was Saints Quarter when playing close quarters combat modes. These modes include Domination and King of the Hill, where players fight to capture objectives, as well as Squad and Team Deathmatch, where the objective is to eliminate enemy soldiers. I found some of these modes got very sweaty very quickly. Now, I'm not the best by any stretch of the imagination, but when I more than hold my own and was among the top performers in one game playing across different classes, soon after in a new lobby I'm humbled incredibly quickly and left struggling to score at all. That took away a little bit of the fun for me, as I felt as though I was just waiting for these kinds of games to finish, but I didn't experience that in the larger scale modes. Overall, multiplayer in Battlefield is great fun while not necessarily breaking any new ground for the series. It refines what the series already does so well to an even higher standard. Given that it seems developers have been focused on getting Battlefield back on track, I could completely see why this approach has been taken. But it would have been interesting to see if some risks could have been implemented at launch. Maybe more will be taken in future updates with maps and modes, but that remains to be seen. It seems as though Portal could be relied on to do the heavy lifting in that regard. Unfortunately, I was not able to go hands-on with the new Portal builder itself ahead of launch. There were a handful of playable experiences available to check out though, which were Infantry Conquest, Infantry Breakthrough and Hardcore Conquest. All quite safe and predictable variations here. They were fun to try, but they only really gave a taste of the amazing creations that I've no doubt will come, especially as there will be spatial editing where players can make changes and additions to existing maps at launch using open source development tools. There'll also be new experimental modes such as Top of the World, where players race others to reach the highest point of the map using weapons to slow down other teams in their advance. Portal will undoubtedly allow for players to have unique and crazy experiences, but I wanted to see more examples of this at launch from the developers themselves and for these to be integrated into multiplayer more. I can't shrug the feeling this is a big component of why EA has played it so safe here, as players will be able to experience crazy modes and rules in Battlefield 6 should they wish through Portal, but just not necessarily from the brilliant creative minds of its developers. Now, Battlefield is back with Battlefield 6. EA has nailed the multiplayer for the most part, the massively key aspect of any first-person shooter really, especially in its longer game modes and with close quarters combat being fun on the whole too. It feels very grounded, and that's what a lot of players have been clamouring for, even if it does feel safe and doesn't really break much new ground. Its campaign is good and is definitely worth playing through. The personal moments of the story are the standouts, and the mission themselves are really fun, just be aware of some instances of jank you may encounter. I didn't get the chance to fully check out Portal at the time of writing, so this has not been factored into the overall verdict. I can't help but feel Battlefield 6 does feel safe. I would have liked to have seen a bit more polish with the campaign and for developer creativity to not have been stifled so much, which prevents this from being an all-time great at the moment. But with it being a live service game, let's hope future updates such as new modes, maps and fixes, along with brilliant community creations in Portal, can take it to the next level, as Battlefield 6 will undoubtedly be around for a very long time. For me, it's an 8 out of 10. Battlefield 6 is out on PS5, Xbox Series X and S and PC on the 10th of October. For all things Battlefield 6 and all the latest gaming news and views, be sure to keep it locked on indie100.com.